Welcome to Attention Retention with Jackie McManus, your source for the latest trends in transportation recruitment and retention.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Attention Retention. I'm Jackie McManus, CEO and founder of KJ Media. We are a recruitment marketing agency specializing in talent attraction, optimizing hiring processes, and driving efficiency to help grow your workforce. And on this show, we dive into the world of recruitment, retention, and recognition by interviewing industry leaders and experts as we unpack the strategies, challenges, and successes surrounding these three critical aspects of workforce management. And this week, I'm excited to be joined by Stephen Fowler, Vice President of Recruitment for Titus Transport. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jackie.
So, Stephen, you have a few years here in the industry, and I'm so excited to have you on. Titus Transport is one of the largest dedicated freight carriers for top food retailers in the country, serving all 48 states, leasing owner-operators, and hiring drivers. Now, I know you've had some significant impact in working with Titus over the years, and we'd love to start by introducing you to the audience. If you could give a quick bio on yourself and your journey in becoming Vice President of Recruiting, that'd be excellent.
Oh, excellent. Well, Jackie, I started out in this industry in around April of 2010. I had previously come over from the natural stone wholesale business where I managed a branch and it's trucks and drivers and warehouse, all that fun stuff. And well, once the housing market crashed in 2008, I went from a very, what would have been a need-based business to a want-based business. And you know how that naturally goes. So
Sure do.
A significant reduction in customers, so we had to close up that particular shop. So within that time period, I had a friend of the family that was working at JB Hunt, and they asked me to come join them in their recruiting department. Worked my way into management there. I worked with JB Hunt for about 9 years and left there as a senior manager. I was responsible for field recruiting and branch recruiting locations that we had throughout the country. As JB Hunt moved away from that particular, that style of recruiting, I decided to go ahead and try to start my own business, and I did some consultation work. Worked for over 40 truckload carriers and trucking companies throughout that time period, helping them with their recruiting, doing consultation work, and helping them build solid recruiting programs, if even just putting the structure in place. I did that for nearly 2 years. Worked my way over into a management role with a company called Titus Transport. It's a smaller flatbed outfit out of Gary, Indiana, and they do flatbed and refrigerated work. And from that particular point, I got picked up and asked to come join the team at Titus Transport to help build their recruiting group from where they were. They weren't doing bad; they just needed to do better. And since then, in the last 3 years, we've seen we're currently 95% seated at this particular point. I've helped reduce our cost per hire by about 50% over the last 3 years. So really kind of applying some of the principles I think we're going to discuss today is really what helped make me successful here. But throughout my entire career, everything's been pretty well data driven and keeping the truth out there, because there's the truth in the numbers when you make it happen that way, correct?
You're preaching to the choir. Data-driven insights are the number one thing that we look at on the marketing side. And, oftentimes, even believe it or not, we're training our clients on how to look at the data. What are your average cost per, lead to full application rate? What's your cost per hire? Cost per hire by source. Let's break that down, because, there might be some avenues, let's call it, XYZ media company, where we may have a lower lead flow, but we have a higher conversion rate. So we want to put more money in there. And so really it does come down to data-driven decisions. And that's why I'm excited to have you on, because of the structures you put in place, especially with previous backgrounds. And I really want to kick it off by starting with recruiting, the first R, and really the heartbeat of the conversation. What would you say in your experience have been more of the successful approaches to attracting and recruiting drivers in today's market?
Well, we have discussed this, and I would say it's mainly making sure that your information is accurate, and making sure that what your ads say, your recruitment staff says, what your recruitment staff says, the folks at the terminal or the end user location actually say. So really, it's a daunting task for a lot of carriers because it's that communication of, oh, has this job changed? So throughout that, the majority of what we do to make sure that we stay on that competitive edge, number one is knowing what other companies are paying in the area. It's rate compensation. So you had mentioned earlier that you were surprised to see that people didn't even know what other carriers were paying in the area. And why can't we hire folks? Well, we're not anywhere competitive within that range. So basically, a hybrid of what we do is maintaining and managing our information flow. It's all placed in one location. Everyone has access to it, but only one person's able to make that change on what's going on with that data. So you can't, if you have everybody's fingers in there, it's not gonna,
It's a
going to corrupt
document. Let's just say that.
Very much. So if you're keep control with one person, that's the person with whom the buck stops. Yeah. So it's making sure that your information is accurate. It's monthly and bi-monthly or quarterly reviews of everyone's job descriptions. It's reviewing what driver pay actually is. So when you're advertising an average weekly gross, it's actually that average weekly gross. Are you going to make more a little one week? Yeah. Are you going to make less next week? Yeah. It just depends on how traffic flows. But here's where your average is going to be. So controlling your information and making sure that it is the same across the board is probably the most way we've been successful attracting better talent. Is that we want people to show up and hear the exact same thing.
And that's why I actually reached out to you directly, and we've had incredible guests on the show from all different size carriers, but I have to say that typically is not the response that we get, but that's the response I definitely believe in is that centralized approach, having data that is consistently being updated. Now, easier said than done, Stephen, right? But I think that's usually the challenge is that a lot of these companies start out family owned. And then they grow and they're in the industry for 10 years now, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and then decades go by, and sometimes the information just doesn't cross over or communicate, or departments just don't communicate. With your background, the one word you mentioned, and I really like this word, it's structure in place, to ensure that there is a structure in place. What advice would you give to companies that would be looking to improve their overall communication internally? How do you choose the best point of contact to manage that Excel spreadsheet, and set up that rhythm of meetings?
Well, sometimes, when I started here with Titus, it was basically that all started with me. It all started with one individual, and then you could get to reach your point where you delegate that responsibility out to other folks there as well. But taking that and knowing exactly what you want, having the information that you need, and then after you've had some time to build that, what a lot of folks, and what I think the daunting task is for folks, is that they don't have anything from the past, and spreadsheets and that sort of thing, and maintaining and tracking data is malleable. You can change these things. But a daunting task, I feel like, for some is that we don't have any data. Why are we going to start saving that? I have now 3 years of solid recruiting data numbers that are based on the way I want them and based on, the way the metrics that you set up for yourself. So, but it is going to be different with everyone. It's not a one size fit all for anyone, because there are companies with 40 tractors that a lot of this information it's a little too much. It's not necessarily a thing. Mainly starting with being able to track what your return on investment is with an ad vendor is probably going to be the best way to get started on that, and know what your cost per hire per vendor and where you get the best conversion rates. And like you said earlier, seen it where plenty of folks, I might get 5 applications from one vendor, but I convert 2 or 3 of those, whereas it takes me 50 from another vendor to convert 2 or 3. So, that's really, part of that strategy there to get going and get started is start out, and it's okay to start out putting something on a sheet and building that spreadsheet. It will evolve over time, and then you can start really tracking your KPI and your return on investment.
In a way, it's baby steps. I was thinking of one of my favorite movies growing up was What About Bob with Bill Murray, and it's a funny throwback movie. But throughout the journey of the movie, he's saying baby steps. Baby steps to the door, baby steps, and I think that's the best advice that you could really give the audience. And something that I speak on often is it's so there, in today's market, it's information overload. There's so many ways to get data. There's so many ways to go about it. And folks, it can be easily overwhelming and then you just don't start. So starting with that small baby step and, start somewhere and then let it evolve over time, I think is a really credible and actionable step for the guests.
And additionally, it's in that same vein, going out with your operation and finding out what their actual needs are. I didn't think this would be a difficult issue until I really started digging into it and asking folks, what's your actual need? How many people do you actually need to perform this job? Mm-hmm. Blank stares initially. And now it's bringing everybody back active and saying, look, how much do you need? We'll get you there. Give us a place to march to, and we'll get there and we'll exceed that. So it has a lot to do with being persistent from the recruitment side, but it also has a lot to do with your leadership giving you the ability to go out and find that. But it takes support from every level. It takes support from safety. It takes support from operations. And those people have to be willing to support your recruiting team and their goals. And I would be remiss to say that if I had not had that within my senior leadership team saying to everyone else, get this guy what he needs. He's building us something great here, and supporting that and backing that up, we wouldn't have the success. So we wouldn't. It would really just be people fighting an uphill battle on a regular basis with folks that don't want to talk to one another. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's a true sense of teamwork, and that's definitely evident in the 95% seated rate right now. So congratulations for that, Stephen. That's quite an accomplishment to achieve just in a short time frame of the last 2 to 3 years, being a very interesting freight market, to say the very least. But I want to jump over to retention and recognition. You have some really exciting programs that are happening here when it comes to recognition and how you're retaining your drivers, and those kind of go handhold. But if you could share with the audience what you guys are doing over there as far as recognition, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll say this kind of follows the general theme of having, your recruiting department having some teeth and having some ability to really make things work. And that support's important, but we are actually right in the midst of launching a recognition program. It's actually been running for 2 months. We've, been just taking each terminal, and we find these folks, we give the terminal managers kind of a loosely based skills or set that I'm looking for. So I have, your objective, find the actual things that, make them part of the terminal, and then the subjective criteria. And that subjective criteria is basically who are your best drivers with safety? Who are your best drivers with on-time delivery? Who are your best drivers when it comes to, customer interactions? Who's not late for work? Who doesn't call off on shifts? Who's willing to go that extra mile? And then you ratchet back to the objective, and that's, who is really a representative of our core value of we serve, and who is the person that's willing to go out and go that extra mile for everyone. So putting that together is as simple as loose enough structure that it is a driver of the month at each location. It's a driver of the quarter at every location. It's a driver of the year at every location, and then it's an overall driver of the year for the company. Every one of those has monetary compensation in the form of either a gift card, driver of the quarter, where our senior leaders are making it a point to go to terminals and have dinner with these folks that have earned this recognition. Mm-hmm. Our driver of the year is now currently at each terminal earning it's right at $1,500 for just one terminal, and our driver of the year company will receive a $5,000 check. So it's real money. It's something that's really tangible. Yeah. It's giving folks that are already just on the driver's side, that are already super competitive about who's the best driver, who's the best. So putting some emphasis on it is such a small spend in comparison to what a return that brings a company based on value, based on esprit de corps at each location. If everyone's proud of what they're doing and they get their face on the wall and they get to walk by it and see it every day, and it's just a huge, huge deal. It's recognizing the people that actually are the reason why I'm sitting here talking to you. They are why we have jobs. They are the reason why. So we've got to put more back into that just on the recognition side for drivers. That's also coming into play at the end of this quarter for our corporate staff, our people that work in our offices that actually do this as well. So it's not just a one size fit all. It's if you have culture and you need to show people that your company has culture, well, we want ours even furthermore to be one of recognition and one of gratitude and thanks. So again, it's nice for people to say, yeah, good job, you got driver of the month, and have that. We'll put your picture up. A lot of places do that, but throw some real money at it. Throw some real incentive for folks to say, hey, I really appreciate this. Not just, hey, that a boy. Medals on your chest look good, but money in your pocket's a much nicer thing.
Yeah, the medals on the chest, you served, and thank you so much for your service. And in a way, you can relate to putting the medals on your chest and having that armor, and having a place to show your friends and family, your kids, hey, I got safe driver of the month, or driver of the month. I'm getting recognized because we're in an industry where folks are often away from their families for our, even if it's Monday through Friday, they're away from their families. They might be missing the Little League game. They might be missing, dinner with grandma. There's, everyone has a life outside of work. And so we all make sacrifices in that regards. But when a company is recognizing the employees, and that's kind of why I did jump over to recognition, because how exciting this program is for you guys, because I truly believe, and I'm sure you do too, it ties fully into recruiting, because you're able then to identify, who our ideal drivers are, who are the successful ones that are getting the awards, and then how can we find more of them out there, and match that criteria. Essentially, I think of it as a driver persona. I mean, you can call it other languages, but really figuring out and having that holistically through and through the company. So it really it all ties together, doesn't it?
It does. And in order for it to actually be legitimate, it needs to stand on its own. It needs to be a core part of the culture that is supported from your C-suite down. It needs to be stand on its own. It has secondary benefits. I don't consider any of these as a return on investment benefit. These are all secondary benefits that they're going to provide. Yes. Will they help with recruitment? Absolutely. Will they help with retention? Also, yes. Those are secondary results. The primary is that we're looking for is that the recognition is there and the money we need to spend to show that. The secondary effects are in better safety for folks across the board, better compliance for folks that maybe not want to wear their vest in the yard. Well, you might not get driver of the month if I don't ever see you running around in your vest when you're out in the yard, or if you're not doing your pre-trip or post-trip inspection. So the secondary benefits of all of this are basically what we're trying to accomplish, but the main goal is to really show that we have that recognition as well, because that is the cultural piece. People are now, the way things are in this market is, we're looking at a 1-to-1 hiring scale right now. Everyone that needs a job pretty much has one.
Yep.
So you're looking at a company that is, I think I have less than 40 positions available. That's wonderful, but now is the time to say, this is important. Let's make this happen, because what happens when we start to ramp back up and people start to get phone calls? Are they going to start checking? We've looked at data that, the average truck driver looks for a job about every 2 months. And depends on where they're at. They're looking for something around every 2 months. And you see that with the 90-day cycle of terminations and people who willfully let go. But the biggest thing we're trying to reduce from all of this with retention is to take those people who voluntarily leave and cut that number in half. Being available to talk to folks, being able to and open and honest with your people is the biggest piece. So that's what's going to help you with your retention side all day.
You said a couple really, really incredible things that I want to just highlight there. I couldn't agree with you more. And this is the time to focus on the recruiting, the retention and the recognition side of the business, because it's often rare where it's a little bit quieter in the industry. It's a softer freight market, as we all know. But instead of just focusing all the efforts on recruiting and getting new, blood into the company, it's how can we maintain these relationships? How can we recognize these folks so that in 5 years from now, our turnover rate is maybe not 90%, it's now down to 30%. And it's by the efforts that were instilled in 2023, 2024, because the freight market will pick up again. It's going to, and it's going to become increasingly more expensive to advertise across the board. The cost of goods are growing up, especially as we're looking at the back half of Q4. We're going into an election, and it's quite costly. I'm actually anticipating on my side over the next 9 to 10 days, we're going to start seeing those upticks across the board. So it's building your own community for each company, building your own essentially engagement database or talent network, right? And that really falls into the recruiting side. But then more importantly, with the drivers that you do have on, or diesel technicians, you're building that recognition and that overall retention. Could you walk us through the process when a driver gets hired on, and what next? How do they get entered into the recognition program? Do they need to be at Titus for a certain amount of time, or can you walk us more through the program?
Well, basically, it's if you've been there for more than after your first 90 days, you're eligible to start being put in there. So that's fine. We want you to stick around for 90 days, but that's basically it. So getting into that program is making sure you're not you don't have a bunch of crazy safety incidents. Just making sure you're not running over people in the yard or dropping trailers. Basically, come in, do your job, and you're good. Like so,
Imagine
basically,
that.
yeah, you're come in and do your job. And honestly, it's technically you could reach driver of the month after your third month. So that's depends on how the calendar lines up. But yeah, after your third month, you could reach driver of the month at that particular point. So yeah, that's where we're at with that.
So right off the bat,
why withhold these things? I mean, you're speaking about retention. We've adjusted. I think I have 2 jobs right now that have a sign-on bonus, and we actually took a lot of that away because we felt like that was people were sticking around until they got their sign-on bonus, and then they went bye-bye. One thing we've never done is taken away our referral bonus. That stays. And that's something that everyone knows about. And once they show up, they're known that, hey, we want to be a company where their friends or our drivers are referring their friends to come and work for them. That's how you build a sense of community, because my friends are all fairly like-minded individuals. I have a few that are way on the other side of the spectrum, but they're all like-minded individuals. I don't hang around with lazy people. No. I don't. Yeah. That's not my cup of tea. Yep. So if you're good at your job and you're referring people in to come work for you, they're probably going to be a pretty good fit and have the same temperament and mentality that you have, as we all kind of adjust to people that are like us or similar to us.
Yeah, and on the advertising, and obviously we're top of funnel, and we want to see that. We want to see that there are referrals. That is that 20% is coming from referrals, and it's because of how you've treated a driver, and they're bringing over 2 to 3 of their friends or their brother or their cousin. It sticks, and that's really the primary goal for a lot of companies. But that falls into the recruiting and recognition. And recently, we have our audience of drivers, 250,000 drivers that we survey, and we our community of drivers essentially. And one of the things we ask them is, why didn't you apply for a certain job on one of those major job boards or social medias? And some drivers actually don't apply because of the sign-on bonus. Yeah. And they say,
you wonder why it's there. Yeah.
Exactly. They're like, why is the company offering me so much money? And it ends up, as we peel back the layers of the onion, it's really a retention bonus because the dollar amount is not given within the first, day, right? Or even maybe 30 days. It's typically paid out over X amount of months, sometimes even years. And so, the really good drivers out there are going to look at that sign-on bonus with one eyebrow up, saying, "I don't think I'm going to apply to this company because of that sign-on bonus." So I think it's a move that we always suggest to our clients. And there's another way to restructure it. 1,000%, the
Yeah.
money should go to the driver. But on the advertising side, that's what we found on our end for drivers.
Yeah, and I've over the past several years, I've learned a very similar lesson with that. Really, what a sign-on bonus is for the larger carriers to bully other folks out of their market. If you think about it, there's some in particular in jobs nearby my area that I'm seeing a $20,000 sign-on bonus paid by a 3-month carrier for a job that is basically hand-picking and tossing freight off of a 53-foot van.
20,000.
Yeah, and that's one piece at a time freight. So, you're going to have to pay some people some money to come and do this kind of job, but nobody sticks around on those. Nobody wants to stay on those jobs because you're quite literally taking one piece of freight off at a time and rolling it in somewhere, and that's hard work. So we as an industry can do better with those kinds of jobs and those kinds of customers as well, but. That's a topic of conversation for another day.
That might be the next podcast.
That's what drivers really see when they're looking at and seeing a sign-on bonus that's large from a company. I offer two in two areas where I'm having a difficult bit hiring, but it's not a big sign-on bonus. It's just enough to augment, and it is a retention style thing. I'd like you to stay on. Certain jobs take a little bit longer to learn, and I would like to put a little bit more incentive on there. There's nothing more to it. That's it. So, but you're correct. A lot of people see sign-on.
Yep, they kind of run away. So, Stephen, I'd be curious with your background as an industry historically with high turnover. What do you think the primary reasons are behind this, and how do we address these challenges as an industry?
Wow, oh goodness gracious! There's a number. That's a loaded question because there's a number of reasons why anybody would want to just dip on this. Number one, it starts with information day one, and that's where recruiting does tie into this. It starts with the information you've been given day one, that first subject we discussed. Sometimes the information is not accurate. Sometimes whomever is responsible for these folks may have just gotten trained. It doesn't even know how to really onboard this employee or this individual here. So that's just the beginning. So we look at hiring somebody to work with our company. It's not just a number to fill quota either. This is this is an individual's life and livelihood. It's not just, a driver, it's their spouse, it's their children, it's, their pets. Everyone's livelihood and everything relies on us being upfront and honest with that. And for folks to walk in and say, ooh, I got to pause. And some folks might give it, 20, 30, 60, 90 days to see what it might be, but people don't have time to play when it comes to their livelihood. So your biggest portion of your retention starts with how people are recruited in. Mm-hmm. Secondary is going to be how the operation runs and how people are treated. If you're able to get into a good schedule right away, that's a key thing. However, as long as things are communicated to folks, I feel like they're willing to make a sacrifice to order to work into a schedule. I haven't met a truck driver one that will say, I just don't want to do this and, I don't want to do that. They do. You just have to communicate with the individuals and say, hey, look, this is what I need you to do. Can you do this for a while? And I maybe have something for you. But it's that relationship starts day one when someone shows up to orientation and you talk about what their schedule is going to look like, because it's impossible to tell some folks what a schedule looks like right away. Unless you're working for the Postal Service and getting up at 4 a.m., it's
the union job, but
fair. But it starts with recruitment.
Yeah.
A lot of the other reasons people are leaving is their paychecks aren't what they say they're going to be. They get hit with unnecessary fees. there's a number of reasons why people would leave, but it does first start with the recruitment side.
That's what I think the most important part here is that the emphasis on recruiting is really the initial connection rate and the initial glue between
Yeah,
the driver and the carrier. And oftentimes, and I think now is the opportunity for a lot of trucking companies to really assess their team and how they're communicating with the drivers and making sure that it's actually what operations is doing and what their paycheck is going to be, and make sure that information is centralized like you mentioned, so that the recruiters have a better opportunity to have a more direct conversation with the driver and transparent. We're in the trucking industry. It every day is not rainbows and butterflies. Actually, most days are not rainbows and butterflies. I mean, we have a lot that's outside of our control, weather, people, traffic. I mean, you name it, it's usually in our way, and in the driver's way. So what we can control, I always say, control your controllables. And your controllables really is how the company communicates with the driver. And I think you saying that you're really changing lives by changing people's careers often goes overlooked. It's kind of numbers and butts and seats, and we kind of as an industry sometimes take the human element out of it, and really focus on that that aspect. But there's a way to balance both, in my
yeah,
opinion.
and that
Right.
ties back into why the recognition is important, because
Yep.
yes, I'm quite literally on this other screen. There's a marvelous spreadsheet that I'm looking at this particular moment, and I'm watching numbers change and update as things go through the day and things progress. That's the numbers that help drive budgets. That's the numbers that help drive spend and help control those controllables. But every single number also represents a livelihood. It represents a person and an individual and their families.
Right.
And we get so removed in this industry from whom we're actually working with and whom we're speaking to. Like these folks are not some commodity that's bought and traded. You have to be upfront and honest and right with that information, and you got to come with it correctly every single time. And that's where I think our controllables through the recruiting side is after 90 days. At that point, I feel like the operation has
Absolutely.
a lot more control and should have a lot more control
Yep.
about their turnover and how that works. But I mean, we managed just on that principle over last year, we had a 26% decrease in overall turnover with the company. And we're still
Congratulations.
tracking and trending that way. However, through this summer, we've seen kind of a swing lately.
Yeah.
And that's we're able to kind of be, okay, well, we're reaching a great capacity. We're able to say, hey, by the way, you haven't turned your camera on your truck, guy, and you're running into a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe this isn't the right line of work for you. So
Sure.
it is swinging both ways. But if you approach it as understanding that you're not just talking to a number, you're not talking to somebody that's holding the seat. You're talking to somebody. When's the last time you drove 10 hours?
I know that was a rhetorical question, but I'll tell you, I
Yeah.
drove from New York to Pittsburgh to go visit some customers, and hit traffic. I mean, typically it's about 7 hours, but it ended up being 10. And as as I got past hour 5, I just had so much gratitude for every single driver out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to drive home, a couple of
Yeah.
days later. Now most time these people are doing it within a 48-hour, time period, or I mean, we all know the deal here. So I just had so much immense gratitude, because I could tell you, you definitely get in your head. You start thinking some wild thoughts, and it gets lonely out there. And I know this. I probably called everyone in my Rolodex ever available.
That's why headsets. That's why put
And
this
that's
thing
why
on and get going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that's one thing on the recruiting side. It's interesting. Oftentimes when we work with companies, recruiters maybe will not call drivers. They rely solely just on SMS and email. But you know, pick up the phone, give the driver a call, especially if they meet your criteria or fill out full application versus just emailing them, because they're
So
driving. We want them driving.
You need to be calling. You need to start out with a call. You need to follow up with an SMS if you have permission. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, that
Yes,
is a thing.
permission.
And you need to send out an email because they've already given you your email address. That's fair, but you need to do that on the best possible time to reach folks. But you need to contact folks within 4 hours of receiving an application. Overnights, that's hard to be avoided, but they need to be called within that time frame in the morning. Key and time to contact is actually so very critical in this. I did just want to circle back to that 10-hour time break that we're talking about making a drive. When you're making a kind of a drive like that, you realize you've got four wheels and you're in a little car that can do faster than 70 miles an hour. You can pull in and stop whenever you need to stop. You can stop a lot faster, and not everybody's trying to frickin' kill you. These guys are out there busting their butts every single day, and you feel it when you're at night and you're driving. I had one recently when I moved here to Lexington. I was driving late night in a big box truck from U-Haul, pulling my car behind me and hitting the blinker, trying to get over, making, passing folks. The drivers are actually, those guys that are out there at night still working, they're flashing their lights, letting you know it's okay to get over. So they're not only there making their living on the roads that we travel on every day, but those belong to them, and they're the shepherds of that place. So it's just so much, and that's where I get from that, Jackie, and that's where I've learned to really put forth that thought is, these are not just numbers. These are not people these are people.
You gave me chills thinking about it. The shepherds. You often hear of these stories of incidents happening on the road, and truckers are the first responders in so many ways, and it'll get highlighted for about 10 seconds on Lester Holt, and that's about it. But they are the highway heroes of the world and of our country, and really the heartbeat. The ATA. I'll put it in the show notes. The ATA just released this incredible video. It's about three minutes through YouTube about the impact of truckers in celebrating drivers and the essentialism of our industry that often goes overlooked by the day-to-day folks, not really understanding the impact of these drivers. And I think once I retire one day, my drive is to essentially, when you're getting your driver's license, I would love to teach drivers how to drive around a truck, because many people do not understand how many tons and how they can't brake so quickly. So I think there's a lot to be said there. So Stephen, as we start to wrap up, this is a really high level question, but I'd love to know, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned in your career, particularly in the context of recruitment, retention, and recognition?
Good Lord. Yeah, that is a high level overall, but basically what we just talked about is that's what's given us the level of success, is understanding that we're working with folks, we're working with people, and not necessarily, we talk a lot about, and yes, the numbers game that we discussed, and actually your controllable data, your KPIs, being able to track what your cost per lead, your cost per hire, those are important. Your cost, your ad cost, just being able to break all these things out. That data is amazing, and it drives successful recruitment.
Absolutely.
It does. As far as that's on the fiscal side. On the retention and recognition side, it's very much understanding that you are not hiring somebody to come in and just fill a seat. You're hiring a person. You're hiring their family. You're bringing everybody into the fold when you do that. So having that understanding and that greater understanding is, I think, where a lot of the larger carriers kind of get lost in the sauce. There is that some of them do amazing jobs though with their recognition, and they do. They've got a lot of deeper pockets. But even as you know, I'm talking about with other carriers that I've worked with, they do an amazing job, and able to see that. But really, just I don't know. It's a hard question to really answer, because there's just so many little ins and outs with it. But overall, it's not only treating everyone with that respect, but being able to verify that you are also worthy of that as well. We talked recently about having our calls recorded and making sure that we stay on the up and up as well. If I'm going to ask you to have a camera in a truck and drive, I'm going to record the people that are talking to you, and you're going to have that conversation. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I think, where a lot of folks feel disrespected right off the bat with a lot of companies as well, is that it's, well, so-and-so gets to do it. Well, they've been here for 6 years or whatever, it's not that way. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. And I think that's really what is the most successful key to recruitment, recognition, and that retention side is respect. So you talk about the 3 R's, it should be the 4. Respect.
I think we might be adding that. That's incredible. And I was just speaking to a client earlier today, back to that respect and back to, you're going to talk, walk the walk type mentality. When he joined this company, he found out what, motel these drivers were staying at. And he was like, but when executives or directors came in, they stayed at a different motel. And he's like, we need to meet in the middle. And, it doesn't need to be a 1-star. It doesn't need to be a 5-star. Let's make it a 3-star. And it's just industries. It's company standard. And that alone is something that they talk about with their drivers, right? So it's, we're all staying here when we have our, meetups and quarterlies, but I think that's just as an example purpose wanted to share.
That's a great one. I mean, when you get a rental car, don't come in a fancy, sports car rental that costs more. Even if it is an upgrade, perception is reality, folks. If somebody sees you hot shotting, perception is reality when it comes to that. And so you're correct. I've seen some of the absolute whole hotels that people have been put in, like, this person's going to bring net revenue to your company and gross net revenue, and we're expecting them to be in a $250,000 piece of equipment. We're going to put them in a friggin' motel 9 3/4, and they're going to have to share their hotel breakfast with the cockroaches. No, that is never cool. And if anybody you're still doing that, that's the first thing you can do to take a step away from that. It's a controllable cost, but that's unnecessary. If you're not going to stay there, don't put them there.
Yeah, again, back to controlling your controllables. Now, one last thing. As I mentioned, we have our community of drivers that are actively engaged and listen to our podcast. Stephen, could you share with the audience what type of drivers you're bringing on and a little bit more details about the job at Titus Transport?
Sure thing. Titus Transport is primarily we are a refrigerated grocery carrier. We haul freight for customers such as Aldi's. We haul for Kroger, Ocado Shed, Fry's, tons of different grocery locations. And we do that pretty well around the country. We've got around 12 terminals, we have 13 terminals. One of them is kind of a remote. It's kind of fun how that one works. However, with what we do, our work is typically local. We typically work nights, afternoons into the night, sometimes overnights. A lot of weekend work as well to get started there. A lot of our drivers will typically do 2 days off throughout the week. That's just the way grocery freight works, but we make it a point to make sure we stay within the top 10% of each market that we're hiring in. So we want to make sure that we're offering competitive pay in every location. Safety is very critical with this company because that's everyone else's livelihoods based on the way you drive and take care of things. So we're right now, we've always been kind of growth minded. We're really starting to get back into let's continue to focus on whom we have with us and the folks that are with us now. And we're building that recognition program because we don't want, that people used to say, I'm hiring you to retire you. Oh my God, it still makes me ill thinking about that statement.
That just made me queasy.
We're trying to take I have an old adage that I like. It was Richard Branson, I believe, said that you should train your people and give them enough resources to go on and leave and go work anywhere else in the world, but treat them well enough that they stay. And that's really, an ethos we're trying to foster here as well. But careers with our company on the driving side, wonderful. We offer modern equipment. Again, competitive pay in every market. And we really try to keep ourselves around a 1 manager to 10 driver ratio. We're not trying to keep people where they can't manage and they don't have a manageable number of people to work with, and making ourselves available for folks. So that's really great on our side. So again, like I said, we're growth minded. We do try to grow around 20% every year, and we're going to continue to move that in that direction. But we don't really like to find things that we're going to lose, 1 year, 2 years down the mark. We want to hang on to long-term accounts, and we want to continue to foster and cultivate relationships with our clients and our drivers and keep them moving and healthy.
Well, fantastic. Well, fantastic. All of our the link to Titus Transport will be in our show notes if you want to check them out. If you're a CDL driver looking for a new opportunity, growth-minded company, transparency, making decisions that really impact people in a positive way. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been incredibly eye-opening and valuable, not only for the industry leaders that listen to our podcast, but also to drivers. So when they're working at companies and maybe they're not seeing certain practices in place, check out Titus, because that's what they're doing. They're walking the walk. And that's really what it's all about.
That's right. Yeah.
So Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. And that concludes another episode of Attention Retention. Stephen, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Remember, the road to success begins with effective recruitment, thoughtful retention, and genuine recognition. Feel free to share this knowledge with your peers and industry colleagues. Your sharing can make a difference, and together we can empower the industry to thrive. Until next time.